Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Cracks have appeared in the Indian Army ranks after its Chief of Defence Staff said the air arm of the military is supposed to play a supporting role for ground forces. In response, Indian Air Chief RKS Bahuria stated the Air Force has a bigger role to play. He also disagreed with General Bipin Rawat's remarks, likening the role of the Air Force to artillery and engineers in the Army. The spat came in the backdrop of differences within the services on the basic structure of theatres, which aim to bring in a joint approach to war fighting. At least 43 migrants have drowned in a shipwreck of Tunisia as they were trying to cross the Mediterranean from Libya to Italy. In a statement, the Tunisian Red Crescent said 84 migrants were rescued. In Syria, at least 8 civilians have been killed and 9 others injured in attacks in the northwestern province of Idlib. An NGO, the Syrian Civil Defense, says the raging forces targeted 3 villages with surface-to-surface missiles. Idlib falls within a de-escalation zone forged under an agreement between Turkey and Russia. In Canada, 7 members of 2 Pakistani families have been killed in a house fire in Chestermere City in Alberta. Local officials say 4 children were among those dead, while 5 people managed to escape. In a statement, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad is in contact with Canadian authorities for the investigation of the incident, whose cause remains unclear. Brazil has registered nearly 1,900 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 65,000 cases overnight. In Pakistan, 34 people lost their lives and 1,400 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.9 million lives and infected more than 183 million people so far. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in details. Cracks have appeared in the Indian Army ranks after its Chief of Defence Staff said the air arm of the military is supposed to play a supporting role for ground forces. In response, Indian Air Force Chief RKS Bahuria stated that the Air Force has a bigger role to play. The two were speaking during a seminar on Friday. He also disagreed with General Bipin Rawat's remarks, likening the role of the Air Force to artillery and engineers in the Army. The spat came in the backdrop of the differences within the services on the basic structure of theatres, which aim to bring in a joint approach to war fighting. The Indian Chief of Defence Staff is working towards the creation of 4 theatre commands, of which 3 will be headed by the Army officers and 1 by Navy officers. All the commanders will report to the Chief of Defence Staff as per the proposals, which are yet to be approved by the government. And for more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Moinuddin Haider, retired. So thank you very much for your time at Indus News. First of all, an internal spat in the high ranks of Indian military has come out in the open now. How do you see this?
I think this is not a good omen. If there are some issues of this structural nature, they should be discussed behind the scenes in Defense Cabinet Committee or elsewhere. But to come out public and give 2 senior officers giving statements against each other, I think doesn't augur well that the defense force is not pulling in one direction. And this is a great strategic flaw. Indian Air Force is a big Air Force, and in its own right, they are supposed to have a significant role in the defense of the country. They're not subservient to the army. Not only that they're in a supporting role, they can take, independent operations of military air superiority and other missions, which are not all the time supporting the ground forces. They are creating their own effect. So I don't think this is a very wise statement given by Ramin Papit, and this will surely, have its repercussions on the functioning and cooperation between the two forces.
So, General Heather, India has always remained wary of a two-front war. So what does this row say about a lack of cohesion between the two forces and their senior officials?
Yes, certainly. I mean, recently, Indian Air Force was used in a big way the Kargil counter-attack. Their coordination was okay. But now it seems that they are giving it a secondary role by this statement by Raman Papit shows that they are giving it a lower role, which may not be the policy of the government, and it may be a statement by the Army Defense Chief. So I think this will have to be resolved at the cabinet level, Prime Minister level. But this has to be resolved, otherwise it will, create a lot of dissensions between the two forces.
So you already alluded to certain repercussions of this row. Now, what sort of effects do you think it will have on the overall morale of the soldiers?
You see, whenever a force tries to show that there is a superior force without realizing that everyone has to play its role according to a larger scheme, there are heartburning. There is lack of cooperation. They say, okay, you think you are too big and you can do it, well, go and do it yourself. Things like that, such like attitude starts developing at all the tiers of the two forces. This certainly is not good for the coherence and for, combined operations.
So does this row have any sort of link in any way to the Indian Army's failure in occupied Kashmir and its last year's standoff with China?
Well, I think, it has nothing to do with that at this moment. But surely, between the two, there will be tension between the two forces. In Kashmir, of course, there is not a very big role being played by the Air Force, mostly predominantly it is the ground force. And same so on the Chinese border, Air Force was hardly used except for logistic purposes. So this is an internal feud of India at the moment.
Lieutenant General Moinuddin Haider, retired, thank you very much for your time at Indus News. We really appreciate that. Now moving on, in Indian-occupied Kashmir, protesters have taken to the streets a day after the occupying troops martyred 5 youths in the Pulwama district. Local media says the police fired tear gas and shotgun pellets to disperse the demonstrators. The Indian troops have also arrested 2 civilians during the crackdown in the Shopian district and Banihal area. Meanwhile, the so-called cordon and search operations in the Rajouri district continue on the 5th consecutive day. All entry and exit points of the area have been sealed, causing inconvenience for the residents. The forces have killed 384 Kashmiris since the revocation of the occupied valley's special status in August 2019. The Taliban have rejected the predictions of a potential civil war in Afghanistan after foreign troops' withdrawal. In a statement, the group said all foreign and internal parties should stop plotting to continue the war.
Said the thought of Afghanistan transforming into a proxy battleground is completely against prevailing realities. The group accused foreign forces of planning to use Afghans for their own interest after pulling out of the country. It said Afghan nation is united and has no intention of fighting what it called the battles of invaders following the end of the occupation. The statement added the Taliban have conquered the centers of 120 districts in the past few weeks. Earlier, Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby said the turnover of Bagram base to Kabul was a key milestone in the withdrawal. But he said the U.S. military still has the authority to protect Afghan forces. Meanwhile, as the Taliban and Kabul's forces continue to fight, Afghan Defense Ministry said the security forces have killed at least 90 fighters in Helmand and Kandahar province, while the Taliban claimed they have captured 5 more districts in Badakhshan province.
At least 43 migrants have drowned in a shipwreck of Tunisia as they tried to cross the Mediterranean Sea from Libya to Italy. In a statement, the Tunisian Red Crescent said 84 migrants have been rescued. The boat that set off from Libya's northwest coast included migrants from Egypt, Eritrea and Bangladesh. The incident occurred just days after the downing of 7 migrants off Italy's Lampedusa island. Moving on to Canada, where 7 members of 2 Pakistani families have been killed in a house fire in Chestermere City in Alberta. Local officials say 4 children were among those dead, while 5 people managed to escape. The official said the cause of the fire remains unclear and an investigation is underway. Both the families were related and hailed from Karachi. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has expressed deep sorrow over the tragic loss of lives. He said Islamabad is in contact with the Canadian authorities over the investigation of the incident. The Foreign Minister also directed to extend every kind of cooperation to the affected family. In Syria, at least 8 civilians have been killed with 9 others injured in attacks in the northwestern province of Idlib. The Syrian Civil Defense NGO says the Assad regime targeted 3 villages with surface-to-surface missiles. The villages fall within the de-escalation zone in Idlib, forged under an agreement between Turkey and Russia. But the Syrian regime has consistently violated the terms of the ceasefire, launching frequent attacks inside the de-escalation zone. Syria has been embroiled in a vicious civil war since early 2011, which has displaced more than 5 million people. Iran has denied U.S. accusations that Tehran supported attacks on American forces in Iraq and Syria. In a letter to the UN Security Council's president, Iran's envoy Majid Takht Ravanchi said the claims are wrong and lack authenticity. Ravanchi condemned U.S. airstrikes in Syria and Iraq, terming the raids a flagrant violation of international law. He said the U.S. argument for raids has no factual or legal ground, as it is founded on mere fabrication. On Tuesday, the U.S. told the UN Security Council that it had targeted an Iran-backed militia in Syria and Iraq. Washington said it was deterring the militants and Tehran from conducting attacks on U.S. personnel or facilities. Arab coalition in Yemen says it has destroyed another armed drone launched by the Houthi rebels towards Saudi city of Khamis Mushait. In a statement, it said a booby-trapped aerial vehicle was shot down over Yemeni airspace. Moreover, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has denounced the Houthis' unending attacks. The OIC termed the attacks as a terrorism act against the civilian population and facilities. Israeli forces have injured at least 87 Palestinians protesting against illegal Jewish settlements in the West Bank. Occupying forces used tear gas and fired live and rubber-coated bullets at the demonstrators. The Palestinian Red Crescent said 3 people were wounded by live bullets and 84 by rubber bullets. Occupying forces also attacked protesters who rallied against Israel's plan to demolish Palestinians' 17 homes in Silwan. According to the international law, all Jewish settlements in occupied territories are considered illegal. There are about 650,000 settlers in the West Bank, including occupied Jerusalem, living in 164 settlements and 116 outposts. Brazil has registered nearly 1,900 deaths from COVID-19 and more than 65,000 cases overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 3.9 million lives and infected more than 183 million people so far. More in this report.
With thousands of deaths daily, investigations into the government's handling of the pandemic, and waxing controversies, Brazil has been in turmoil. A top prosecutor has agreed to request an investigation of President Jair Bolsonaro for neglect in the process of procuring an Indian vaccine. Municipalities denied a newspaper report that cities administered expired AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine shots. Brazilian officials blamed the confusion on an error in the System of Public Health Network, SUS. Meanwhile, China said it will send 1.5 million Sinovac vaccines to El Salvador, while the U.S. will send 1.5 million Moderna vaccines to the Central American nation. Over in a remote indigenous village of Ecuador's Amazon, residents received vaccinations as the country steps up immunizations. While Rani's community previously received information on the benefits of receiving immunization.
We have started the vaccination program for the Warani population located in the Ecuadorian Amazon in the heart of Yasuni Park. This process has been done together with the Health Ministry, and we have vaccinated approximately 100 people so far.
Europe's medicines regulator has approved a scale-up of Johnson & Johnson's plant in the Netherlands that produces the drug substance used in its vaccine. As Delta variant is endemic in Britain and is expected to become so in Germany this month, German Health Ministry has announced measures to boost vaccines' effectiveness. Berlin says it will possibly combine a first shot of the AstraZeneca vaccine with a second shot of BioNTech, Pfizer, or Moderna. Over in France, the Delta variant now represents around a third of COVID cases in the country.
It is the Delta variant that is very contagious. It represents nearly 1/3 of positive cases in our country, and it has increased by nearly 75% in 1 week. So we really need to understand that today there is no resurgence of the epidemic in our country, but the infection rate, meaning the spread of the virus, has stopped slowing. We are at around 1,800 new daily cases, and we see that while the Alpha variant and the other variants that we know well continue to decrease, the Delta variant has started increasing.
The U.S. says it will ship 4 million doses of Moderna vaccine to Indonesia via the COVAX Global Sharing Program as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia will restrict travel to and entry from Ethiopia, UAE, Vietnam, and Afghanistan over coronavirus concerns.
Pakistan has registered 34 deaths from COVID-19 and 1,400 cases overnight. The Health Ministry says the nationwide tally of deaths is approaching 22,400. It says the country's positivity rate has once again surged to 2.9%. The ministry says out of over 32,000 active cases, more than 1,800 are critical. Pakistan has so far reported over 961,000 cases, while more than 906,000 of them have recovered. The country has administered over 16.7 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines so far. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Pakistan's Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi visited Pakistan Naval War College in Lahore. He was received by Commandant Pakistan College retired Admiral Mohammad Zubair Shafiq on arrival. Addressing the attendees of the 50th Staff Course, Niazi highlighted maritime security challenges in the face of changing regional situations. He also mentioned Pakistan Navy's ongoing defense mechanisms. The course participants earlier held a debate on the 5th generation hybrid warfare. The U.S. has threatened to hold Belarus accountable for its actions after it ordered closure of the border with Ukraine. A senior U.S. official said Belarus is again seeking to deflect attention away from its repression against its people. President Alexander Lukashenko claimed rebel groups that were planning to carry out a coup had been uncovered in Belarus. State media quoted him as saying that border closure was aimed to block an inflow of weapons to coup plotters. Speaking at a gathering, the Belarusian leader said Germany, Ukraine and the US were behind the alleged rebel activity. The move to shut borders comes days after Belarus recalled its representative to the EU over sanctions. In the U.S. state of Florida, the death toll from a residential building collapse in Miami has risen to 22. Rescue workers pulled out 2 more bodies from the rubble. Authorities say 188 people have been accounted for so far, while 126 are still missing. They are feared buried beneath tons of pulverized concrete and twisted metal as the search stretched into its 9th day. Nobody has been pulled alive from the debris since the condo came down on 24th of June. Meanwhile, Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava signed an emergency order to demolish the remains of the building.
This afternoon, I signed an emergency order authorizing the demolition of the building in the interests of public health and safety as soon as the engineers sign off on the next steps to begin the demolition process. So it's important to note that we're still evaluating all possible impacts and determining the best timeline to actually begin the demolition.
The U.S. says Boeing 737 cargo aeroplane made an emergency landing in the Pacific Ocean of the Hawaiian coast. In a joint operation with Honolulu Fire Department, the U.S. Coast Guard rescued the pilot and the co-pilot of the aircraft. In a statement, the Federal Aviation Administration said the pilots had reported engine trouble. They were attempting to return to Honolulu when they were forced to land the aircraft in the water. The FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board will investigate the incident. Meanwhile, Boeing says it is closely monitoring the situation and is in contact with the NTSB. Hurricane Elsa has battered the island nation of Barbados, sparking floods and causing widespread damage. Officials say the hurricane triggered power outages, toppled trees and damaged homes in the south of the island. Authorities have urged Barbadians to remain under shelter and only leave homes if the structures were damaged. No deaths or injuries have been attributed to the hurricane so far. Later, Elsa pounded St. Vincent with heavy rains and winds as it continued to move towards Haiti. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says the storm is blowing maximum sustained winds of 140 kilometers per hour. Lightning strikes in Western Canada have soared nearly tenfold from the same time a year ago. British Columbia and Western Alberta recorded over 710,000 lightning strikes, up from an average of 8,300 over the past 5 years. Officials say the strikes caused several forest fires across central British Columbia, with 136 fires still burning. They said the fires are expected to burn through 100,000 hectares by the end of the weekend. Meteorologists have attributed the record-breaking heat wave to the spike in lightning strikes. They have warned of more strikes over the weekend that could further stoke forest fires fanned by high winds. China has successfully launched 5 new satellites into their planned orbit. The satellites blasted off atop a Long March 2 carrier rocket from the Taoyuan Center in Shaanxi province. They will be used to conduct a survey of the space environment and experiments on related technologies. According to the Launch Center, this is the 376th mission of the Long March rocket series. Islamabad says the completion of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor and Gwadar Port is its highest priority. Chairman CPEC Authority General Retired Asim Salim Bajwa said the work on the completion of the Khoshab Road is underway. Addressing media in Khoshab, Bajwa said CPEC is the biggest development project in the history of South Balochistan. The official further noted the completion of CPEC roads will resolve communication issues in the province. Bajwa also said Prime Minister Imran Khan will visit Gwadar on Monday. The U.S. says it is working to get more countries to join the agreement backing a global corporate minimum tax of 15%. White House economic advisor Brian Deese said the deal will help create momentum for the U.S. to increase tax rates at home. In a press briefing, Deese said the deal will also help raise the revenue needed for a range of investments. 130 of the 139 countries taking part in talks agreed to the broad overhaul of rules for taxing international firms. Among the holdouts were EU's Ireland, Hungary and Estonia that have sought to attract investment with low tax rates. The German finance minister said he expects EU to rapidly implement the deal despite the refusal of several members to sign it. And now the weather situation from around the globe. That is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.